Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Huaye, and these are our main stories this week. The war in Iran continues to disproportionately affect Asian nations, and governments are scrambling to cope with supply disruption, even if it could mean dialing back on their climate goals. Living alone and struggling to make ends meet. As Japan's population ages, some of the elderly are making the ultimate choice between a free but difficult life and a time in prison. The world's biggest music competition is heading to Asia. The Eurovision Song Contest has announced its first edition on the continent, with Thailand as the host country. More than 1 month after the war in Iran started, there is still no end in sight. Iran is now effectively turning the Strait of Hormuz into a toll gate. And nowhere has the impact of shipping disruption been felt more than in Asia, the region receiving more than 84% of the oil and gas passing through the waterway. Camille Knight is here to give us an update on the situation. Hi, Camille.
Hi, Yuka.
So how do things stand, particularly in South and Southeast Asian nations where soaring fuel prices are really affecting people's lives?
Well, let's start with news coming out of Pakistan, where consumer prices for diesel and petrol are being hiked by about 50%. That's its second increase in less than a month, and comes just days after Iran agreed to allow 20 Pakistani-flagged vessels to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. The situation, therefore, only getting worse for consumers. Let's hear from one of them.
How will they feed their children at home? How will they run their households and cover their expenses? And if they live in rented accommodation, how will they pay their rent? This is an injustice to the public. The way people are being fleeced is unacceptable. Instead of shifting its burden onto the public, the government should have borne some of it itself.
Now, other countries in the region also announcing deals with Iran. Manila saying Iran has pledged to allow safe passage for shipments of oil on Thursday. You remember the Philippines declared a national energy emergency as prices at the pump doubled, with transport workers facing really the immediate brunt of the crisis. Jeepneys, for example, only making a fraction of their daily wages. The prediction now is that food prices could be next, with harvests also being impacted. And people have been taking to the street to protest the government's handling of the crisis. You can see some of those protests there. So potential relief ahead for the Philippines with that deal, with analysts noticing that shipping through Hormuz has picked up slightly over the past few days, but we're only talking about a handful of ships here. And of course, reversing the damage that's already been done won't be a quick fix. Looking at Vietnam, there's no such deal with Iran, but the government has scrapped some fuel taxes until mid-April, though prices remain significantly higher than they were before the war. Sri Lanka too is in a difficult position, declaring Wednesday a public holiday to try and mitigate the impact. And of course, tourism across the board is taking a hit, with higher airfares and disruptions to travel, reducing that demand. It's estimated the sector is losing about $600 million daily.
So it does seem like a full-blown crisis unfolding in many countries. But some countries, though, are coping better than others, particularly in East Asia. Have there still been some impacts there?
Well, as you say, in East Asia, China and Japan have huge stockpiles that mean they're better insulated from the conflict. Japan has one of the largest stockpiles of oil, which means it could last up to 8 months even. South Korea also dealing with the crisis relatively well, but some vulnerabilities have been exposed, particularly when it comes to naphtha, a petrochemical that's used to make plastic or semiconductors. South Korea recently making its first purchase of Russian naphtha in response to the crisis. Now, there has also been some panic buying, kind of reminiscent of those COVID days, a rush for toilet paper in Japan. Ironically, supply hasn't really been affected, but I guess that's just a knee-jerk reaction to these kind of situations.
Yeah, because toilet paper is domestically produced. And
exactly.
It doesn't really depend on imported oil.
Exactly. However, in South Korea, we're seeing plastic bags, a rush for plastic bin bags. That's because plastic bags are made from naphtha, as I mentioned just before, that petroleum derivative that South South Korea imports. So people are finding the government-approved bags in short supply on shelves. One minister told people not to worry, though, that if there were ever to be a shortage, people would be able to use kind of any kind of plastic bag instead.
So they will be able to throw away rubbish. Now, governments are also racing to make up for the supply shortages stemming from the war, especially in liquefied natural gas, and that could have an impact on our planet.
That's right. Liquefied natural gas has been seen in a lot of cases a way to sort of transition or bridge away from coal towards cleaner energy. But with that in short supply now, countries are turning back to coal-fired power plants. South Korea, for example, has delayed the shutdown of a coal plant and lifted caps on electricity generated from coal to mitigate that impact. Thailand has increased output at its largest coal plant as well. The Philippines having similar plans. India as well, that relies on coal for nearly 75% of its power generation, has asked coal plants to run at maximum capacity to avoid planned outages. Now, climate experts are urging countries to invest in renewables, which aren't as susceptible to these kinds of shocks. One positive is that Delhi has sped up clearances for commissioning wind power plants and battery energy storage systems. So there's maybe a push for other countries too to become more self-sufficient. But of course, this can't happen overnight.
Yeah, it will take a long time. Well, Camille, thank you so much for that. Japan's demographic crisis is unfolding even inside prison walls. The number of elderly people in jail has quadrupled over the past 20 years, as poverty among the elder generation has also been on the rise. Some go to extraordinary lengths, choosing to get caught shoplifting in the hope that in prison they get better food and healthcare. Our correspondents visited one prison facing an influx of such inmates.
For the guards at Japan's biggest prison, this has become a familiar routine. Fuju Prison in the Tokyo suburbs distributes more than 1,800 diapers every month to elderly inmates who live with incontinence. Here, nearly 1 in 4 prisoners is aged over 65. At times, it looks more like a retirement home than a prison.
Some inmates can't eat regular rice because it's too hard for them to chew, so we mash it into porridge.
Yutaka Hayashi has witnessed dramatic changes during his 3 decades working in Japan's prison system. For one thing, the number of inmates aged over 65 has quadrupled over the past 20 years. Hayashi is our guide as we are given a rare opportunity to follow a group of prisoners. They're all aged over 70. Some have disabilities.
With younger prisoners, we worry about fights or escape attempts. But with elderly inmates, that's not really a concern. What worries us most is that they might fall and injure themselves.
At Fuju, prisoner care goes beyond providing food and shelter. Staff must also ensure that they look after the health of the men in their care. The prison introduced light exercise sessions 6 years ago. While younger inmates work, elderly prisoners focus on their physical rehabilitation. Therapists take the inmates' blood pressure, test their reflexes, and help them improve their posture. They speak loudly, since many of the men have hearing difficulties. The therapy is free. This man, we'll call him Murata, has 5 sessions a week.
I'll keep exercising until the day I'm released.
The older inmates' physical condition deteriorates while they're inside. When they're released, their lack of strength can affect their mobility and their ability to manage their daily lives. So these exercises are essential for their rehabilitation.
If the number of older inmates seems high, it's partly because some prefer life in prison to fending for themselves on the outside. Even minor offences can carry custodial sentences in Japan, so some men play the system. Murata is a repeat offender. His most recent crime was failing to pay a bar bill.
Honestly, I had no one to rely on. When I ran out of money, I ended up doing things like eating without paying. I told myself, if I get caught, I'll just go back to prison. The day I get out, if I don't have a place to stay, I might have to sleep outside, wherever I can.
He's far from alone. According to our guide, some inmates spend their last days in prison.
Some people have been here 7 or 8 times. One inmate stole items worth less than 20 euros. For some, that's the total amount they stole across multiple prison terms. For them, prison cells eventually become somewhere to live, a place that feels like home.
And finally, Eurovision is marking its 70th anniversary this year, and 2026 will also see its first ever edition held in Asia. The organizer of the world's largest singing contest has announced that broadcasters from 10 Asian countries will take part in Eurovision Asia 2026, with the finale taking place in Bangkok in November. Monty Francis tells us more.
This is a new chapter in the Eurovision story.
Known as the world's longest-running international music competition, Eurovision's show-stopping glitz has arrived on a new continent. Organizers have announced Eurovision Asia 2026. 10 countries are confirmed to compete, with a promise of more to follow. Thailand, the host country, will be joined by the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and South Korea, already a powerhouse on the world stage of pop music. Other iterations of the contest, including an American version, have failed, but the allure of K-pop alone could draw in millions of viewers for the Asian spin-off. BTS, the most successful act in K-pop history, has just launched a new world tour. And the second most streamed album of 2025 was the soundtrack to the Netflix film K-pop Demon Hunters. One of the tracks on that album, Golden, won an Oscar for Best Original Song. The original Eurovision is marking its 70th anniversary in Vienna on May 16th, but is being boycotted by at least 5 competing nations over a decision to allow Israel to compete following the war in Gaza and Israel's second-place ranking last year. It's yet to be seen if politics will interfere with the Asian contest, which retains the word Eurovision in its title despite its location. Each of the countries competing will hold their own contests to select an entry for the finale, set to take place on November 14th in Bangkok.
And that's all for this edition of Access Asia. Thanks for watching and see you next time.